Good morning and welcome. You have joined the PIM and PIA Mid-America Financial Executives Council program on maintaining growth in inflationary times. My name's Teresa Campbell. I'm with PIA Mid-America. And before we start the program, I want to note that all of our attendees are in mute mode during the entire session so that we can get a quality recording that will be made available to all of our members following the program in the coming days. You'll receive an email with a link to be able to access that recording so that you can share it with your team or listen to it again, pick up on the details that you might have wanted. We definitely encourage you to comment, to ask questions during the program. This is really about sharing information and getting input from the entire council. So you can raise your hand at the bottom of your screen, and Ben with PIM will unmute you so that you can talk, or you can type in that Q&A field that's at the bottom of your screen. If you have technical difficulties, we want you to use the chat field so that we can separate those and deal with any technical difficulties we're having. As many of you know, the Financial Executives Council has leaders from both regions that guide the program, and the content is offered every other month. It's really focused around financial reporting and compliance, data management and security, and financial policies and planning. It's a robust group, and it's more important today, as you know, than ever before. Our economy is facing inflation. We have supply chain issues. We have workforce concerns, and that's what this program is about. So I'm going to introduce our guest panelist, Jay James, who is with Veritiv. He is the regional VP for print for the Central region. Ken Flajs is also with Veritiv, and he is the regional VP for print for the North region in the country. And Adam Pink, who is senior VP of sales for Meyers printing. Now, the program is guided by our co-counsel, our council co-chairs, and that's Carl Nathy with Meyers Printing, Ken Rain with Daily Printing, Ryan Wagner with Action Mailing and Printing, and Rick Reesgraff, who is with LB Carlson. Rick is our committee chairperson, and so I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to lead us through the discussion.
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, LB Carlson, we're a CPA firm in the printing and graphic arts industry, so the rest of you guys are much more directly involved than we are. But we've been involved with this council for a number of years, and it's been a good one, particularly as we've gone through COVID and beyond and come out of that. We seem to kind of keep moving into new territory as in the last few years, going from COVID to recovery to these inflationary crazy times, the record spending that the government has been doing, those types of things. And so it's been a focus of our clients and is to try to obviously continue to maintain business plans and growth strategies and in this difficult time, maintain customer bases, attract new customers. We certainly know this has impacted the employee workforce, and we've had a couple of webinars on that, so we're not focusing on that today, but the agenda is up in front of you that we intend to go through today. We've got the guys from Veritiv are going to talk about what are the expectations in the supply chain and the pricing outlook for paper, and what does that look like short-term, long-term. We're going to move and then in to get some feedback from Adam from Meyers on customer growth plans and strategies and engagement and that type of thing. And Ken and Ryan will help us with some costing and discussion and making sure that we're touching on that. Lender relations are entirely different than they were 2 or 3 years ago, and getting the banks to understand what we're doing with carrying inventory like crazy that we haven't ever done before, and maintaining your forecasts and business plans. So that's going to be our agenda. There's a lot there. We're going to try to keep moving, but I will moderate and the rest will participate, I think, on our panel. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay and Ken. from Veritiv. The paper market has been a topic that has been of interest to the industry for many months now, and it's still right up there. So I just wanted to see if you guys could share an outlook on what you see happening and where we're going in the future. And I'm not sure if Ken was going first or Jay. I'll let you guys decide.
I'll start off, Ken, and then we can combine our efforts here. But really, what we'd like to do is lend perspective. Looking forward, and first of all, thank you for the opportunity to get in front of this group, because we all have to navigate this through by listening and understanding perspective from a broader view, right? So we can come up myopically of how we see the world, but it's not going to be really relevant as it could be without your input. So I look forward to the panel discussion. I know Ken would probably share that thought, and so we understand the impacts as we go through this together. But I would tell you, we're in bizarro world. We continue to be there. It's an inverted relationship between mill, merchant, and the commercial print market, or the print markets that we serve. So I'll try to get a broad view. I think Ken's got a really good flavor on some of the elements that the inflationary pressures we're seeing, monetary fluctuations on what's going on in the market. But I would start by saying, from the supply side, we're still in a very restrained and constrained environment. Most everything we buy or have access to bring to the market and to sell to our customers is in an allocated or a restrained kind of a position. So we are in a position now where we're in decades in the past, and our history growing up in the business, where we make products available and serve the markets as needed basis. We're in a position now where we buy and make products available as we can get them. So that's a totally different relationship, and we're still going through that. I would think there are several reasons why we see restrictions and constraints in the supply side. You can go mill to mill, you can go different parts of the globe. There's different elements going on in domestic producers and different elements on the global producers. But runaway inflation from an input cost standpoint, logistics, the cost of logistics of moving it where it needs to be to make it market accessible, on top of the mix and the capacity of the machinery and the stuff, and how the mills are allocating using those machines, and making a mix that makes sense from a sustainable standpoint for their businesses. So that's a lot in a broad statement. But I would say, as we look forward, there's the demand element that we're all faced with right now has been in large part due to, first of all, the decline that COVID created, but then the demand recovery that post-COVID has presented itself. So it's in an overstated standpoint in a lot of sense right now, because we're all trying to buy and make available based on a very rabid demand curve right now in the market, right? So if the capacity and our ability to support that demand, we were able to do that more fluidly right now, that demand curve would subside a little bit. I think that from what we see, and Ken, you can elaborate on this, but what we see, I think you're going to see post-election, there are certain things going on right now, but there'll be a little subsiding in that demand as we finish out the year. But it's going to be a gradual thing. And over the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to be continuing the current environment we're in. I think that we're all dealing with, and certainly a big part of this discussion is going to be around the price levels we're continuing to see. I don't think you're going to see the price levels abate any. Matter of fact, there could be continued fluctuations with some more of the input costs and inflationary factors we talked about. But I think what we can expect is try to see a stabilization that's going to go on over the next, between now and really the end of 2023. Hopefully that's the case. We're going to continue to have to monitor that. But then as the way we're seeing the world is post 2023, that you're going to get, as things normalize, supply chains ease, you're going to see more of a decline in commercial print and a demand with the traditional, analog to digital translation that's going on. And you're going to see a more gradual kind of decline. It's not going to be to the extent that it was before. And so that's really projected out in the next, 3 to 5 years. And so that's kind of a broad statement. And I think, Ken, why don't you just echo the way you're seeing the world, and maybe we can fill in the gaps around it with any questions that might come through the discussion today. So.
Yeah,
Ken,
absolutely. And Jay, I appreciate it. And I do appreciate having this opportunity. So, a couple things to add on to what Jay's talking about in demand for sure is, I don't know if you all saw, but just announced recently Pixel closing the Androscoggin mill up there in Jay, Maine. And there was an explosion up there and a digester just couldn't get back on top of that. And so they'll take the insurance money and that'll be done. There was a smaller specialty mill in Port Huron that announced closure of Dunn Paper, Tissue, and Specialty. I think the reason that's interesting is because everybody was running from traditional paper to go to specialty. And yet here's a specialty mill that says we can't make it and we're shutting down now. They have a 7 or 8 mill system and they chose to invest in 3 or 4. So you continue to see that, right? If they don't stay on top of the investment, then they've got to come back and close them because it's just in this inflationary world, it costs too much. We're hearing things like conversions on machines that are supposed to cost $600 million to $700 million are topping $1 billion in this inflationary economy. So that these are big assets with big dollars floating around them. And as we sit here as Veritiv, we're one of the largest importers on record of paper, and we source the globe. And I got to tell you, that's a very expensive thing to do, to put somebody on an airplane, fly them 14, 15 hours. I did it for a large part of my career. You're looking at $30,000 when one of us goes out to go to China or Vietnam or somewhere like that to source paper. And so one of the big things that I thought I would bring today is people continue to say, well, the market will change when the imports come in. And I want to share with you kind of our outlook on that. And right now, we spend a lot of time watching this Longshore warehouse workers union debate that's going on the West Coast. You have a lot of shippers that are avoiding the West Coast because they're concerned. They don't want to have their ship of goods parked out there in the ocean and stuck in the middle of a contract negotiation. But you got 22,000 full-time employees in that union spread across 29 ports on the West Coast. They are negotiating with the Pacific Maritime Association that represents the shippers, the warehouses, all that kind of thing. This happens about every 6 years. And today, if you look at the fight, the union's going to say, we're called essential workers, but we're treated like we're expendable. Inflation's hitting our pocketbooks at home. We want to buy groceries. We want to buy a home. Look at what the rail workers got. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And the PMA in return would argue that, hey, inflation's hitting us also, very expensive. We need to assure ourselves of some robotic functions. That's a big issue in labor today, that when people step in and say, hey, some of these things could be done robotically, that becomes a big issue in a negotiation. The PMA says if Washington steps in here the way they did in the rail worker strike, that could inadvertently cost jobs because that drives up the price that we got to pay to get this done, and more so pushes towards a robotic answer. And then your disruptions, when you set out 2 days to make a point, we now have to ship 40,000 containers from Port of LA to somewhere else, and that's incredibly expensive. So as I said, the shippers continue to avoid the West Coast, which puts a delay on the East Coast, which makes it very difficult to import into the US today. When imports do come in, we don't see a price advantage. We see it very much where the market is. So there's no real relief there. China still has countervailing duties that they would have to pay somewhere around the neighborhood of 30% if they come in. Now, China exports 1.6 million tons of coated and uncoated paper, and we're seeing that going in throughout Southeast Asia today. Southeast Asia, then, where they make paper, they ship into Mexico, or they try to get around to Europe. But we do see Europe starting to calm down now and quiet down a little bit. The war is having an effect. Talk about that in just a second. But it makes it very tough right now, and it's quite a mess out there. But the U.S. sitting in a position right now where there's not a lot coming in, a lot going on that we have to monitor and try to stay ahead of. We think that Longshore and Warehouse Workers Union strike probably continues into 2023. If you look at their reference for the rail workers strike, where I think you all know Washington stepped in and said, we're going to put an end to this, that was a 24% pay hike over 5 years. Now, they've been without a contract since 2019. So it now retrofits back to 2019. That is real inflation that's going to come to the cost of paper, move via rail or anything else that goes via rail. We're going to feel that. They're going to renegotiate again in 2024. The contract that just got put to bed ends in 2024. So all this kind of goes back 3 years, and then we'll be right back in this game in 2 years. So really bizarre the way this thing went down. It's definitely going to impact cost of goods, though, so we're going to feel it. That then goes to the inflationary side, right? And as you all know, Jerome Powell came out and went another 3/4 point. And I keep saying to everybody when they ask me, do you think the Fed will cool off? He hasn't minced words. I mean, he has said, we're going to go full 2 points and we're going to go until we get a hold of inflation. The CPI, the Consumer Price Index for June, 9.1%, dropped in July to 8.5, August 8.3. And that's why he stepped in and said, we're going to go strong again. We're not seeing it cool off the rate we want, but there's arguments, right? And the argument on that is the Fed goes too far, shoves us into a recession that lasts for 6 to 12 months. Our guess at Veritiv is for companies like us, that if you look at a 12-month recession, you're going to lose half of earnings. And if you're looking at 6 months, then half of half, right? 25%, something like that. So we're incredibly concerned about it. But I will say, the Wall Street Journal ran last weekend an interesting article about the Fed stepped up 11 times over the years to cool inflation by running up the rate. And arguably 5 of 6 times it worked. And so you got a 50% chance that this thing lands softly and we do okay. I'm one of the optimistic people. I like to think we're going to land okay. And I know everybody's instantly arguing with me in your mind. But I think today we live in an interesting time where our phones and computers are constantly bringing us bad news. Nobody wants to talk about the good things because people don't click on it. And clickbait is, let me scare the heck out of you and you'll click on my link, right? So when I look at it, I go, here's what I think. I think that despite everything going on, the U.S. is in a good spot. And I think we have a bright spot in labor. I think that the world is looking at us now suddenly and going, you know what's interesting? China's unstable with this issue that's going on with Taiwan, and China wants a stable world. They've got North Korea over there that you never know what's going to come out of there. And then you go over to Europe and you've got a war going on, and Europe is a mess energy-wise. The U.S. with green energy, the push that we try to continue to go towards, suddenly looks like a place for manufacturing to be stable and protected. And it's hard to come into the U.S. and cut supply lines because the U.S. does a very good job of protecting itself. And so suddenly we're starting to hear all this conversation about, let's go build the semiconductor plant that costs $4 billion. Let's go do these other things that guarantee. So how costly is it? Yeah, it's cheaper to go to China and manufacture, or Mexico and manufacture, but what's the cost really? And when you look today at who owns these companies, they're very good business people. And you got a lot of private equity. And if they're not making money, they're out. And so it becomes about long-term versus the short-term win that we all have kind of learned through our careers in business. So I like the U.S. I like where we're sitting going forward. I think there's an excellent opportunity that this thing lands halfway decent. And my only other thing that I would say today is this picture that we all thought was going to be great with a very global kumbaya supply chain. We have learned, if nothing else, in 2020, 2021, and 2022, that any hiccup in that supply chain hurts bad and costs a lot of money and takes way too long to recover from. And so I would couple that and bring it down and finish with this to say, there's one more piece that lines up with that as well. And to Jay's point of how tight capacity has gotten because the paper manufacturers have gone on to do other things, close capacity, that sort of thing. Today, when a mill has a boiler pipe burst and it takes them a week to repair it, they lose 30% of production in a month, which takes 60 days to recover. And there's no other mill who can help them come out of that because that mill's selling everything they can make. So all the things that we used to have, inventory sitting at the merchant, inventory sitting at the mill, and something went wrong, you never felt it. You never felt it because we had enough inventory to cover it. Today, you're going to fill it instantly. And we continue to see that happen. So the supply side is tough. The supply chain for us has been pretty good. We're pretty happy with our supply chain. And but we are selling everything as quick as we can get our hands on it. There's no doubt about it. And we just don't see imports being a factor for a while yet, 18 months at least.
Ken, I had a question. In terms of that inventory level and not having inventory at mills and at your suppliers like you guys, but we've seen a lot of the printers certainly increase their inventory levels. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Has that helped also in terms of being able to bring some comfort in the next year or so in terms of how to weather this?
Yes, absolutely, Rick. And I got to tell you, I mean, my advice to my customers has been, you have to do that. Even if you've got to go out and do some third-party warehousing or something, and I know I can easily say that like that's not a real expense. I get that it is, but I'm telling you, we make up such a big part of what the printer does that when I started in this business in the 1980s, everybody had paper on their floor. And then you had all this capacity come in on the paper mill side, and the paper mill side said, you don't need to do it, we'll do it for you. And the merchant, we said, we'll do it for you. But once capacity disappeared, that was a problem.
And Rick, I would just echo with what Ken's talking about is that what we're all feeling, and I would include everybody on the call, is the build of that inventory. In a large part, early on, we were all trying to figure out how to navigate what was in front of us. And so there was an over purchase or a let's get what we can when we can get it. And now that's a part of how's this demand going to level out if you've got those inventories that are actually allocated to jobs, if you're sitting on it's non-productive. We all have to deal with non-productive inventories. So I think that the focus now is really the utilization of that and how much of the actual print demand that our customers are seeing are able to be provide, or that inventory is able to go towards. And then it's the replenishment factor. We've got to make sure that we're staying focused on this 3-4 months down the road as much as we can, quarter to quarter. It is not a just-in-time monthly business anymore. It's blatantly aware of everybody on the phone, I'm sure. But all the challenges that Ken just alluded to and gave detail in, we're still faced with going forward. You've got mills rationalizing whether it's sustainable to keep a mill/machine going long-term, given the input costs they're faced with now, or doing temporary shutdowns because it's a situation that isn't sustainable. So inventory is key. You can't, as we all know, you can't make revenue running air through a press. So if it's there, that needs to be translated to revenue and taking care of the demand you're seeing as you go through it. But we have to mutually plan together, quarter to quarter.
And Rick, if you think about it, that's such a big change from where we were, right? The way we operated was we all had a lot of inventory and we negotiated and tried to get the best price and everybody had it. Well, today now we're saying we've got to be a partner and you got to forecast with us because we certainly don't want a printer to get themselves in trouble by carrying too much inventory. And I know their CFO is going to walk down the hall and say, why are you sitting on all these dollars? So we got to forecast like we haven't forecast before, and we've got to have that partnership where we're really talking to each other. And I think that's such a change from where we've been historically, at least in my career and what I've seen.
It's inverted. Yep.
Really quick, Ken Rain, I'm going to open it up to you. You have a question that you've added to the panelist discussion. Will you discuss that?
I just want to ask, what can we as printers do to put a little pressure on these mills or, the paper suppliers to keep them producing the fine paper lines that we need, to keep our processes going? Where does that leave us?
Yeah.
So, Ken, I'll let you answer, but I would tell you, Ken, the position we're in right now is the leverage is not there, right? The leverage is back to the guys making it, and they've gone typically, historically, I've been in the business almost 40 years. The leverage has all been from the market back, and we've all been chasing. They've been building machines and running them as fast as they can, and just you're chasing the last price. Well, that is no longer the case. They're focused. And Ken talked about the dollars that are tied up in these assets, they're focused on a profitable, sustainable mix and what they're going to run through that, and they're going to meter and manage to that. It's a different world that we're in, and it's really, you used the term, we all want to work on how we can get them to come more on our perspective, but the leverage is not there right now. They're basically the leverage is at the mill level. Ken, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I would just add to that, and I'd like to give, in Indiana, we're a little folksy, so I'd like to give you a little folksy story on it, but I think it brings it home. If you think back to the 80s and 90s, and as we've gotten to where we are today, you had way too much capacity, but at those mills, usually what you had was a grandfather, a father who worked hard at those mills, spent their lives in that mill, and they sent the grandson to college or the granddaughter to college, and they came back and rose through the ranks, and they take over. And now we all come back, and the printer is leveraging me, and I'm leveraging the mill. And that person who's tied to their grandfather, their father, their mother, their sister working in the mill, they're going to keep that mill running no matter what. And they'll suddenly take orders for the price of pulp. I've seen it in my career. Sold copy paper at one time to a university that cost less than the pulp that it cost to make the copy paper. And so all that took place just to keep cylinders turning and that kind of thing. Today, that person doesn't exist at the paper mill. The paper mill is owned by private equity. They're owned by a bank. They're owned by a government. They're owned by somebody who understands business and says, listen, if we can't make money, shut it down. Just shut it down. We don't have an emotional tie to this graphic arts industry or the paper merchant industry. So if we can't make money, just shut it down and turn it into a mining data center for Bitcoin or something. Actually, Flambeau, I think, is doing that today. So I go, it's amazing what's going on. And so to answer your question, Ken, the best thing we can do is let them make money. And we got to push back to the end users to some degree. And there's going to be print degradation, which is my concern, how much print degradation goes to digital. But the one thing that I know is that I have a daughter in marketing. She keeps saying to me, we can't get the return on the investment in digital marketing. It's still direct mail. It's still are these things. But I'm worried, personal worry, are the printing sales forces in the world, and I think Adam's going to speak to this, but are the printing sales forces in the world able to describe that to the end user when the end user is just beating the snot out of your printing salespeople? I've had printers ask me, is your sales force good enough to get through this? And I say, my sales force is irrelevant. The printer's sales force is the Olympic superstar that we're all relying on now. And I hope to God they are, because that's where it's all going to fall, unfortunately. Because if the end user doesn't buy in, forget it. They're just going to keep shutting them.
Thanks, Ken. That might be a perfect segue to Adam, but I just want to make everybody aware, we've got all these topics in this time frame, and you may not think of all the questions right now, but certainly I assume you guys would be available for follow-up emails, questions, and that type of thing too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, maybe Carl, could you introduce Adam a little bit, and then Adam take us into the Olympic games, if we could, with the sales efforts right now.
Sure. So Adam is, again, the Senior Vice President of Sales with Meyers Printing. Meyers is located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but Adam himself lives and works out of Salt Lake City. Adam's an industry packaging expert, I'd say. He also hosts his own podcast, active on social media and doing TikTok and other videos and stuff like that relating to the print industry. Also a pastor, just man of many talents. But with that, Adam, take it away.
Carl, you forgot that I live in Utah and I have 5 kids and 1 wife. That's my favorite detail of all of them. Yeah, I appreciate it. This is such a fun topic and something that I've been passionate about. Prior to the current environment, right? The pandemic and inflation and wars and all that stuff. For me, I really got into this idea of how to engage with customers when I realized that the printing industry, and specifically the printed packaging industry, which is where I've been for 15 years now, I was like 30, let's see, how old was I when I got into sales? I was 31 when I started my job at WS Packaging. And I remember I went into a room about a year into that, and we were going around the table with all the salespeople, and every one of them said, my name's so-and-so. I've been selling stickers, which was the fun thing that we like to say was labels. Well, I've been selling stickers for 37 years. I've been in the industry for this, for 28 years. And it got to me and I was like, I have 32 years of human experience. That's how long I've been alive. And for a while up until I left WS, I was the youngest sales rep. So I was there for 8 years. So even when I got to, 39, 40 years old, I was still, and I went, okay, I started to kind of look at the industry and I said, we have a sales entity that as an age demographic is getting older, and we're not recruiting younger sales talent, but we have a buying segment and a buying demographic that is getting younger, and they are buying things differently. So my question became then, and it has just amplified over the last couple of years, which was, how do I engage with people who are, and in some cases now, I'm almost 42. In some cases, buyers are 20 years younger than me. And so how is it that we engage with them, because they're still buying printing, they're still buying packaging, I think it was, oh shoot, where'd he go? Was it Ken? I think it was Ken. You were talking about, how do we communicate the value of print versus digital? It's tough because nobody cares about your printing press and how awesome it is, right? They got to do so many things, and all we want to talk about is how great our stuff is. Wow, let me tell you about how fantastic Revere printing is, and it's like nobody cares anymore. But what they really want to hear is like, how can you help me accomplish my job? Because I've got to do twice as much as I had to do, 4 or 5 years ago. So I hope this is useful, and I'm going to go through some good and bad things that I've found over the last couple of years about how do we grow, specifically, how do you grow when, I think it was Jay said, like, you can't print air, although I'm sure somebody's tried to, right? Like you've got to be able to get stuff to print. And when you're on allocation, how is it that you grow effectively, and depending on when that comes up? So how do we grow, and then how do we strengthen our bonds with our customers over the next 12, 15, 18, 24 months? And so I'll give some ways that I would not recommend doing it. And you might laugh about the bad, but take a good look in the mirror and go, yeah, was that kind of what we're doing? Because everyone knows it's going to be a bad idea, but knowing and doing are two different things. So let's start with growth strategy. So start with the good. I am a pastor. I like to be a bringer of good news, which is where the term evangelist comes from. So let's talk about the good stuff first. I think something that we don't do as salespeople is really get involved in what our customers are doing. So finding out what is, so like we sell to like CPG companies. I'm not sure who everyone's customers are, but if we're selling print or we're selling printed packaging, nobody's really buying our stuff just to consume it and use it, right? There tends to be a customer. I would want to know, how are they really feeling the rise of inflation? Because not every customer base is the same. Some customer bases aren't really it's not being much of an impact at all, right? So I think about like, I haven't looked at this number, right? But I'll think about like iPhones. It seems like iPhones and Apple Watches just keep getting purchased because it's become such an integral part of our life that when the iPhone 14 comes out, people just go buy it, right? And it's just a thing that happens. So, if Apple's cost of their packaging goes from whatever $2 to $2.75, is that really going to have much of an impact? Probably not. And by the way, I've been in the facility that makes the Apple packaging. It's over in southern China. It's crazy to watch. It is a really crazy process. But really digging in to find out what are your customers dealing with inflation? And let's say that they are, because most people are. If they are being impacted by it, then having a conversation around how can printing help your customer gain market share during this time, because we've already seen, like retailers have started to do SKU reductions so that they can buy more products, so they can drop down their price point. Well, how are you going to stand out on shelf? Maybe it's a small little embellishment that's going to catch somebody's attention. Maybe it's augmented reality, right? Maybe it's leveraging, NFC technology, whatever it might be. How can you help them gain market share during an inflationary time? That helps out the printer, obviously, and it also helps out your customer, because if our customers are not growing, we tend to struggle to grow. So that's number one. Finding different graphics, finding different substrates that can help them go out and grab market share and go sell more of their products to their customers. Another one that I do a lot of is, and I do this when there's not inflationary times, when there's not allocation issues, it's especially important to do today, which is to sit down with your customers and look at different strategies on material buying. Obviously we want forecasts and we want all that stuff, but really also qualifying alternative materials that you have confidence that you can get. So, per Jay and Ken's conversation, it's a different time. You used to just be able to buy various different label materials, various different paperboard materials, various different corrugate materials. There were some hiccups here and there, but not to the extent that we've seen it right now. So if you have a line on something that you think that you can get over the next 12 to 18 months, talk with your customers about qualifying that. So like in the folding carton side, it used to be that nobody, if they were on SBS board, was going to try to switch over to a CCNB, right? Because the gray comes through and it took out their colors. I'm telling you, more and more brands are like, sure, if that's what you can get me, and if the price point makes sense, then let's do it. Let's do some drawdowns together. But you got to do that first. You can't wait until the order comes in and go, hey, by the way, we're 20 weeks on SBS board, right? So start those conversations proactively early with your customers. The third thing on a growth strategy is this, and this is unrelated to the previous two, but I think it's actually really, really critical, and I'm shocked that more people haven't done it. Train your employees, all of your employees, not just your sales team, all of your employees on how to use LinkedIn to benefit your current customers and your ideal customers. Here's why I say not just your salespeople, and why I say LinkedIn. So back in 2017, Packaging Digest ran an article. It was in February of 2017. They ran an article that said, it basically was like, where are printed packaging companies focused, or just packaging companies? Where are they focused on social media? And everyone was like, all the brands were like, we're focused on Facebook, and we're trying to figure out Instagram, and we're trying to do all this. Then you just go down to the bottom and it said, where are people spending their time? And 68% of the people surveyed, this was back in 2017, 68% said that they frequently use LinkedIn. Nobody was spending time or money on LinkedIn because they just thought it was a job search platform. They just thought it was, whatever. And 68% were frequently using that site more than any other site, more than Twitter, more than Facebook, right? And so that's why I say, if you had to pick something when you're looking at a growth strategy, specifically pick LinkedIn. It does a good job of kind of weeding out a lot of the bad actors. It's kind of self-governs. It's a safe place to go. And I think that all of your employees can benefit from it. And I'll go through like strengthening your current customer bonds with what not to do. But when all of your employees are at least understanding the power of this tool, the power of this platform, and they are sharing just awesome stuff that they see with permission from your customers. Hey, it's a press operator who goes on, right before her lunch break and says, was really excited to have run this thing for this company, 5 months ago. It just hit the shelf or something like that. That creates a world in which people are paying attention to you and your company. Your company will always benefit more than the individual will. if you can train them correctly on how to use it, not to just go out and try to sell stuff and reach out with terrible messages to people on LinkedIn, which I'm sure a lot of you all get. So those are the good. Here's my bad on growth strategies. And again, you're going to laugh, but ask yourself, is this what we have done to grow? Because I know companies, I know you're out there. I know that you've only done this. The bad is only grow through price increases and share those via email. That's a terrible idea. But how many of us in our industry, we're just so not used to this. So we live in email. We think, okay, I'm just going to send out these price increase letters. Of course, with your big customers, you're going to have some kind of nuance, but then everyone else, you just say like, hey, per the pulp and paper index or whatever index you want to use, your prices are going up X and it's going to be on this date. I think that's a terrible idea. I think if all you're doing is communicating transactional stuff, you can grow, right? Because where are they going to go right now? But long term, it's a terrible growth strategy. You are degrading your customer base by doing that. And then the second bad is when a customer requests something that you only communicate to them what the lead time and what the availability and what the price is of what they requested. Meaning you are not engaging with empathy and creativity. You're just simply being a yes or a me too person. So they say, this is what I want. Like I just got a call from someone who said, I called my current label supplier. I asked them about this label material. And the answer I got was, I'm not making this up. This happened last week. Last week, they said the answer I got from my label company was this. It's going to be between 6 weeks and 6 months. I have no idea when I can get the material that you need. Not, hey, this material, is really struggling. However, material supply over here, looks like we can get some here. Maybe can we qualify? No nuance, no creativity at all. Just, and by the way, your price is going to go up 32%. No wonder they called me, right? Like, no wonder I'm growing from that because they knew that I wasn't going to leave them in a bind, right? Like, I'll get as creative. Carl's probably heard me time and time again on our leadership calls, right? Like, I'm not afraid to do whatever I can to make sure that my customers are taken care of. Lots of people are that way, but make sure that all of your customer service and all of your salespeople are engaging, especially now, and leading with creativity and empathy. So speaking of that, let's talk about strengthening customer bonds during challenging times. The first one is this, and I know I've talked about like LinkedIn and social media, and yes, I'm on TikTok every day. Yes, I host a podcast. I have a whole sound booth in my closet, right? But the thing that we have to do now, more than I would say, even more than we did 3 years ago, is show up and be present. It is so easy today to set up Teams meetings and to set up Zoom meetings and to set up all that stuff. And I'm telling you, just being there, physically present with your customers as often as it makes sense to do is critical right now. There's this idea of like relational proximity. Think about it in your personal life. The people that you probably interact with are people that you are in close relational proximity with. So if you're a sports, or if you are part of a church community, or just in your neighborhood or whatever, you just bump into people and then you plan a dinner or whatever it is. At least that's how my family and I are, right? I'm not always going on Facebook looking for like dinner friends. It seems to just kind of happen accidentally. When you show up to your customer, you end up getting pulled into all sort. Oh, hey, you want to go talk to Becky over here? She's got a new project for X, right? It's amazing what happens when you just show up. So that's number one. How do you strengthen your bonds? Show up more than you did pre-COVID. Be in front of them. Schedule business reviews. Do all that stuff in person. Get out. Go see people. Number two, talk about it. So if you're going to be trained on LinkedIn and social media, you want to talk about your customers' products all the time. If you have permission, all the time. You see a press release, post about it. Not how great you are, how great your customers are, right? That is a great way to strengthen those bonds. So I'll go to the store, I'll make TikTok videos, I'll make LinkedIn things, I'll have people on my podcast, right? Like that are current customers of mine, because I want them to know that I really am for them, which obviously makes sense if we're printing stuff. Because the more stuff that they sell, I already said this, the more stuff they sell, the more crap they got to buy from us. and the cycle just keeps continuing. So there's a selfish reason, but there's also a, put others before yourself kind of a thing that's more altruistic. Share about so not just on social media, but if you've got really great customers, this is something that not a lot of people do. If you've got really great customers and they have products or they have services or in this case, products that you can buy, pull them into your manufacturing facility. If you've got a food company that buys from you, go buy their food. Talk about it with your friends, right? Like if your customers know that you're a customer of theirs as well, that's going to be great. Pay full retail price for it. Go buy their stuff on Amazon. Go buy their stuff directly from their site. Get creative with asking for referrals. Be a blessing to those who give them to you. Ask for referrals. Tell your salespeople to ask for referrals. David Sandler talks about this. He's a sales trainer, or was a sales trainer. He's not alive anymore, but he says money grows on trees. They grow on referral trees. Have monthly business reviews in person. I already talked about that. So there's a lot of different things that are quote old school that bring a lot of value right now in strengthening those customer bonds. The bad I've already talked about is just the status quo, right? Just more Teams meetings, more Zoom meetings. Carl's probably heard me say this before, but it drives me nuts that like salespeople on my team take every call and are always in the same spot in their office for all of our Teams meetings. I'm like, no, go. Like go to a networking event, go to see your customers, go wherever, right? Like just go be with people. Cause when you're in your house, it's comfortable, it's safe. You can, just do whatever it is there. I love it, right? I can just go upstairs and have lunch, but I want to be out. So the status quo is a bad idea. Another bad idea is to not engage with social media. I'm telling you this, I just cannot keep saying it enough. It's not hard. We're overthinking it. It's not hard to have a presence on social media, especially on LinkedIn. TikTok's a little weird, just so you all know. It's kind of a cesspool of weirdness. But it's a great place to create content. But a bad idea is to just stay off of it and just occasionally get onto it and only talk about how awesome your company is. When was the last time any of you on this call or this webinar logged into your personal Instagram or your personal or on the LinkedIn or onto Facebook or on whatever, and you thought, I sure hope somebody's trying to sell me something today? Zero. They're like, man, I hope my inbox is full of insurance and financial advisors asking for 15 minutes of my time and they'll give me a $25 Amazon card. Zero. Why do we think our customers are any different, right? So when we get on social media as salespeople and as service providers to an industry, we've got to think about how would I want this to be received? And so I really try hard on my social media to just be a blessing to other people and to help elevate them. So that's kind of what I've got. I know I've talked for about 18 minutes. I was trying to keep it down to 15, but anyway, I don't know if there are any questions that came in. I wasn't even paying attention, or if anyone on the panel has any questions, I'm happy to answer some of those.
I just wanted to, I think your comment about getting out there physically is so huge. We're a CPA firm. We have a little more introverts in our firm than maybe a printing company, and it's been so comfortable for everybody to get used to Zoom or Teams or whatever it is and stay in their office. And I just know if we don't get out there, our competition is going to, and that's going to make a difference because our customers are receptive to visits. They want to see you. They want to talk to you. They're in the same place. They've been cooped up just like we have, so I think that's a great piece of advice, Adam. So.
Yeah, for sure. And it might seem counterintuitive where I'm like, get involved in social media and also go see people, but it's not like it's a zero-sum game, right? We all have 118 hours a week or so that we're awake. You can plan it out. You can be super productive during your, 40 to 50 hours of work time. Plan it, execute it, budget it, and then go get it. I saw a question that came in. I didn't read it though.
Yeah, let's go to Ken. Ken Rain had a question there that I think is terrific.
Yeah. Adam, you're talking about having passion doing that. And you talked about age sales force, and we're in that same boat. How do you bring that back? It feels like we've been beat down with the price increases, the COVID, all of this. How can you rekindle that passion? Because at one point, I'm pretty sure our two sales reps from Veritiv can speak to this. When you got into this business, you were real passionate. And how can we rekindle that on a day-to-day basis?
That's a tough
That
one.
goes right in hand with what Ken said. So Ken, I want to include you in this discussion, the 4 of you that were talking about it, but he had said your print salesperson has to be that Olympic superstar to the end user, and it's all connected. So Adam.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's hard because I think that, Simon Sinek talks about the idea of like starting with why and maybe rediscovering that why. For I can only speak for myself, and for me and my team, it is an individual thing. Not like I have never been super motivated by I've got to go slay all these accounts and I've got to go be a hunter and it's a war out there and I'm going to go to the bank. I'm going to go make as much money as possible. There are people who are motivated that way. I was never one of those people. And so I got motivated when I found out that for every $250,000 account that I landed or in revenue that I brought in, we could pay for another employee. Like we could give raises, right? So I got motivated by other things other than how much money was I making. And other people aren't that way. So I really try to dial in with each one of my reps. And this is what you're getting to, Ken, I think is a sales leadership function, which is what is it that everybody on your team wants individually? What are they trying to accomplish? I've got one rep who's never owned a house. And I'm like, we are on the plan to get you to home ownership. So selling packaging is a vehicle for this person to be a homeowner. That's motivating for them. And then after that, we'll find something else. That's not going to be everyone's motivation. So I can't speak for everybody. My dad told me when I got into sales, and it's still something I think is true today, and maybe it's a refresher for others, is he said, son, you have to fall in love with your customers' problems, not with your company's products. And I think that we probably have a lot of people who have fallen in love with their company's products, and those products are suffering now because you got to go give all these price increases. You got to deal with all the problems. And instead, we need to realize there is a ton of problems that are out there that are facing our customers that we should rekindle that dating with. We should rekindle falling in love with them. So that might be a more of a generalized thing, but sales leaders have to know how to connect with their people individually. I don't know if Ken or Jay, you had any thoughts on that.
I know where my brother is on this because he's very passionate, but we all have the same problems. You talked about passion, Ken. Unbridled passion is something that can get away from you, but focused passion and the customer advocacy is the huge part of it. You've got to, by the way, showing up. Yeah, there used to be people that made careers out of just showing up.
Yeah.
And responding to what the market brought to them. If you don't have advocacy right now and trying to get ahead of what not only we're seeing and how you can bring it to the customer's business, you're not providing value. So I would say showing up with a purpose and showing up as that educator, that advocate for what's going on so you can put your customer in a better position to deal with what's going on. Ken, I know you passionately live there every day.
By the way, Jay, for 3 years, I was a packaging buyer. So I bought it. And I had somebody who showed up every Tuesday with 2 donuts in my office and their latest price guide. And I was like, is this what you do all day long? He's like, yep. And he was He'd been doing it for 30 something years. And I was
Well,
like,
I think the other thing that and I'll get over to Ken, but the other thing is the use of technology. The other thing we're having to become accustomed is remote touch, right? We're having to do more remote and the use of technology. And how do you get a guy that's 30, 40 year in the business to utilize the technology, the social media platforms, the Zoom calls? How do you get them to engage and to use that technology for their advantage and for the advantage of their customers? And that's a big part of the challenge, but you have to light the fire and continue to reinforce that. Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I got to tell you, so 35 years in the business, I started driving a truck delivering paper 35 years ago. And I'm as passionate today as I was 35 years ago, more so passionate because you don't get to manage $800 million worth of revenue if you're not passionate. And I don't believe I'm a unicorn. I think I'm a guy who got a chance and appreciated it and shows up every day and works hard to take advantage of it because my family has benefited dramatically. And I am disgusted by the amount of salespeople that get to ride one account for their entire career. And I've never agreed to that. I go, listen, you come to this place to work and you're driving a forklift or you're driving a truck. It's my job to make sure you get to do that as long as you want to do that. And if you want to move up, you let me know and we'll have a conversation about it. But when you step on the other side of the wall and you say my talent is going out and making things happen, then the pandemic never happened to me. That's BS. It never happened. You are here to move the football. You got to go win a Super Bowl for me. And I don't think that in the NFL or the NBA or wherever else where talent matters, I don't think they sit around and go, we'll be happy with a 500 season. They talk to the people that they're paying big money to and they go, you're going to give me a Super Bowl. And that's the way I believe I have to manage my sales force. And I have no problem going to somebody who generates big gross profit, but has done it the same way for 30 years, is milking the same account. I have no problem saying, I love you, thank you, and I'm going to put you in this box. But this kid's got passion. They work. They want to go make it happen. They understand the advantages of working LinkedIn. They sell differently. I'm going to give them ball control and they're going to go do this. And I don't care who it makes mad. It's my job to sit in that room, in that conference room, and make sure the team is getting along. But the second somebody tells me this kid doesn't know what they're doing or they're doing a lot more than you're doing right now. And I don't have any problem having that conversation. But we have let our sales forces off the hook because too many companies are stuck to the gross profit that generates from that guy. And we're too scared to deal with them. And I've said the day I can't deal with the sales force, the day I need to retire and hang it up because it is a different kind of pressure and we've got to start putting it back on. And I just want to share quickly what Adam said, and I'll shut up, about selling different products. I just recently watched a very good printing salesperson go to a step down degraded paper product that was available, sold it to a national brand and said, maybe in times of inflation, you all should care about saving on the product and passing it on to your customer versus the designer in your firm that is married to a more expensive paper product. And he had the guts to make that play. He did it. And he came back and said to the rest of his team, that's how it's done, boys. That's how you get this done is you adjust to what's happening in the marketplace. And I keep going into places and people are looking to me to go, pull the magic chain and make us all get back to 1990. And I go, it's going to be guys like Adam. They're going to get us back to the good old days. It is not going to be what J. James or I can do. Those days have passed.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of, to your point, what that salesperson did that you just described is really what happens in, if anyone's read or if your sales teams haven't, the Challenger sales books are incredibly valuable. Challenger selling, Gap selling, anything by Jeb Blunt. Jeb Blunt just came out with a book. I'm not kidding you. How to Sell the Price Increase. That's the freaking book title. Everybody, there's a lot of great resources out there that we can go get that our team can be learning. I could get on a whole soapbox about that.
But Adam, it is on leadership for us, right? I mean, and that's what I hear you talking about is it's on leadership for us. And I've seen too many places where people say, hey, it's my job to run the place. the salespeople got to figure it out. Well, they're not going to figure it out with great leadership pushing them. And when
Yep.
we push them and challenge them to feel good again about what they're doing and what they're making happen, that's when they win. And I agree with you. I don't see a lot of people going, I need to make $1 million, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go out and buy this and do that. They want that feeling again. And I think they need to be pushed. And once they're successful and they pull something off, they're so excited. And it doesn't matter whether it's a truckload of paper or they sold the paper machine out. I see the same result when they're successful. That feeling of self-worth matters.
Yeah.
I know I deal with it all the time too, as the old paradigms and the old mindset of the good old days, and how I just showing up oftentimes and responding was good enough. I can be first. I don't feel we're ever going to get back to the good old days. It's not going to ever get back to the way it was. And so we've got to continue to challenge those mental paradigms that we're dealing with from old school. So how you're lighting a fire with a guy that's been there 30 years, you got to change that mindset that says, we're never going to go back the way it was, guys. You better start utilizing the tools you have available now and challenging the way you think about how you're going to market. And that's what it is. That's the challenge in leadership. So,
And I've actually got to run, unfortunately, but I will kind of leave it with this. So, I don't know what the good old days were, and I have no interest in figuring that out, because I look at it like I can, if you measure things in sales, right, you should be measuring stuff like into a CRM, by the way. I'm a big advocate of CRM, but you should really understand what is your sales cycle and realize there are tools out there right now to drastically condense your sales cycle down. And the good old days had a longer sales cycle. We have tools today right now. So the best tool that we can use in the printing industry is direct video. Just this is free. I don't know. Maybe you paid for the webinar, so maybe it's not free. I have no idea. But on LinkedIn, there is a way to send a video to a first connection, a personalized video. I cannot tell you, it's a greater than a 50% hit rate for me, where I'm in a store, I see something that I believe a customer that's like wrong with somebody's packaging. I take a quick 30-second video and I send it to them on LinkedIn. It's personalized, it's relevant, and I found a problem. It's all right there. That did not exist in the 80s and 90s. It's there today, right? You can go make content about the people that you want to reach out to in your ideal client profile. You can share it with them. I've got one video that has over 1 million views of me talking about the importance of white opacity on label printing. You don't have to get that creative to make a difference. So that's kind of where I'll leave it. I do unfortunately have to jump to a call here at 11:30 that I'm a few minutes late for, but you can all find me on LinkedIn. My podcast is called the People of Packaging Podcast, if you want to listen to me talk to people about packaging around the world. And if you dare go on TikTok, you can find me at Packaging Pastor. So that's all I got. But I'd love to continue the conversation with anyone.
Yeah, Adam, I'm sure you can make yourself available for email questions or however people want to contact you. So thank you very much for taking time today. I know it's been a busy schedule.
Yeah, thank you.
With that, we'll change gears a little bit. It was mentioned, some of the basic block and tackling is making sure that you are understanding your costs and understanding what's happened to you in this inflationary environment. So at the baseline, making sure that we can get that into the estimating and that type of thing. And some of that has been pretty difficult too, as things have moved so fast. So I don't know, with energy costs and paper and labor and there's the art of communicating all that, but making sure where that is key from a financial standpoint to making sure you're going to continue to be profitable. Ken, do you want to take the lead on that kind of conversation and see if we can drum up some conversation on that?
Most definitely, but now I feel a little inadequate after Adam's little speech there, talking about the good old days and trying to get back to profitability, in the inflationary time. I'm at a quandary here, is trying to be proactive versus reactive in our price increasing. And, in the paper industry, they've been out in front of it saying, it's going to be a 3% increase, 5% increase because of costs. Well, from where we're sitting, my company is we've been more reactionary than proactive. And where the biggest problem or biggest rub has come is getting these costs into our stream and using the kind of old-fashioned way of budgeted hourly rates and trying to get our rates up for pay increases, utility increases, all across the board. The paper and the ink, the material inputs are pretty easy when it comes down to pricing. You're going to pass that price on with a markup to your customer. But where are you going to recover your overhead costs? And that's the biggest quandary we've seen. And we were a little late to the party, I think. And so we're kind of playing catch up. Right now, with my company, is we're trying to develop a good overhead allocation process and keeping those numbers dynamic as each month the pricing changes. And we're seeing price increases in utilities across the board. If we have to sub out any labor, sub out any other jobs, that stuff's increasing constantly. And where I want to lead this discussion is I want to put it out to everybody on the call is, what are you guys doing out there to kind of get in front of this? Are you communicating it through your sales reps, putting it on social media? How are you communicating that to your customers? And that's kind of where I'd like to leave it out and kind of open it up to everybody and see who wants to raise their hand and offer, some ideas or suggestions or what you're doing that helps you get in front of it.
Ken, I'm not sure that I am adding to or answering what you asked, but I might be adding another question. But I know from been in the industry a long time, and in a stable pricing environment, as a financial advisor, we've always advised clients, at least periodically visit your costing model. Make sure that it's tying in with the estimating process and that you're, where you're losing money, where you're making money, and so on and so forth. And but the escalation of what's happened in the last 2, 3, 4 years even, and the timing has turned this into an occasional tool, from an occasional tool into like an immediate priority. Stay on this. Keep updating it, because it's such a moving target. And so I just wanted to emphasize that I think the proactivity is critically important to doing what you're talking about and staying with this. We're not done with this by any means. And certainly if you're playing catch up, Ken, you're not alone, but certainly there's been others that have been maybe sometimes more proactive than others. And again, so making sure, I know Adam talked about how to communicate some of this stuff, but where are you, and understanding that, and I think that's critical.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is come up with something that's dynamic, because like you said, it's not like you can check it every year and say, oh, we're pretty close in a stable market. I mean, this is dynamic. This is month to month. And the biggest problem that we're seeing is with the labor shortage that I think everybody is encountering, is you're trying to backfill, you're trying to find these people, but when you do find someone, you're probably going to have to overpay to get them in. And so what does that do to your costing structure? And as you bring these people in, it just changes again. And so that trying to build a dynamic program is where I'm trying to go, but trying to find the time to do it has been difficult.
Carl, it looked like you had something to add.
Yeah, I guess I'll just reiterate what Ken was saying about how difficult it is, especially to try to make it dynamic. It's our overhead calculations, stuff like that it's a bit of a process to update them and to get through it and to get to a point where you're able to make it dynamic or change it on a whim or on a monthly basis and keep it current, that's difficult to do. I mean, for the direct materials and labor and stuff, that's a little bit easier process, but to capture all the various things that go into an overhead component and try to keep them as current as possible, we certainly haven't found a way to make it an easy process to update and stay on top of.
So I'm going to ask that the group that's on the call as attendees add comments and questions in the Q&A field, or raise your hand if you want to comment so that we can include you in that. And I'll kind of start the discussion with Ken and Carl's comments back to what Ken Flajs said earlier, and Adam, with that Olympic print sales force helping re-educate the industry and the buyers and the whole process, because it's got to get back to a place where we're no longer taking print orders. It really is about what the market will bear and that value add that we're offering, and getting those salespeople up front in the marketing department offering solutions, not just being sent to purchasing to take a print order where we're driving the value down. What the value add is, they will pay what the market will bear when we bring a solution that is well-connected, omni-channel, connecting all the dots that show them that ROI. And it's those print salespeople that we have to turn into those Olympic superstars that Ken referred to.
Yeah, I just add to that, Teresa, I've seen this topic become the agenda, one of the key agenda items in the monthly management meetings, the weekly management meetings. Everybody's on board. You can't wait for to the point of building a complicated accounting system to track all this. There has to be an intuitive, things are going here, we've got to stay with it, and we've got to communicate the value along the way to those customers. And the customers have never been more receptive, in my view, of what I've seen happening in the last few years of taking price increases if you can deliver it and couple it with value. Because I've also heard some printers that are panicking that, oh, we can't pass these on. It's like, oh yes, you can. The customers are looking for people that are going to deliver right now, and if you can do that, they're willing to pay the price.
Rick, I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but I see the problem from, you're trying to capture a variable, a moving target on a cost factor, and you're trying to weigh it into building it into your press rates or your cost base that you need to overcome in order to maintain your profitability, right? So typically, in how we would want to weigh in a cost activity in our business is we would put a load, for instance, on anything we buy. So we would put a percentage of what we determined would need to offset that expense against the cost of goods we bring in. So as long as you're pushing that through, that expense is captured through that load. So I don't know if it's something that you could put in the accounting process in the print organization, for instance, where that load could be adjusted. So you got the mechanics of how you would do it. So if there's a way to measure what cost you have to overcome, and you put a load against the business that you need to overcome in price, basically pay for. I don't know if that's a vehicle or mechanics, but that would be typically something how we do it on our side to address the same situation, right? So Ken, I don't know if
you read my mind, Jay. I was going to say, we've had products, because we're product based, not manufacturer based, but we've had products that just don't turn, but the sales force go, I've got to have that so that I can get this other business. Well, then I'm going to put a load on it, and I'll adjust the load if it starts to get better. And then I'm not trying to define something to fit an accounting system or, change my whole operation. And for us, that's been very successful. And we can load different ways. We can load to cover freight. We can load to cover additional expenses. We can load to start somebody. And one thing I would say along with that, Salesforce is, if you do have an Olympic star today, do not wait. Do not wait. Now's the time to put the young person with them and make sure that they're learning from them and make an investment in your business there. And I got to tell you, if I open the window behind me, those blinds, there's a high school right across the street. And the day of sitting around with an HR conversation of, they got to have a master's, they got to have a bachelor's, Well, they want my job, right? That person wants my job and Jay's job. I want the kid that just wants to work. We used to say, get me the kid who delivers the newspaper and I can make him a millionaire, you know? Well, nobody delivers a newspaper anymore. So I go, find me a kid that's sitting over there who's maybe smart enough to go, I don't know that I want $50,000, $60,000 in debt to teach fourth grade. I think I would be happy to have a decent job with a future. Now, it's a little easier for us because we're a Fortune 500 company, so we can offer some mobility into different ways. But I got to tell you, I'm not having problems talking to young people. I went over there last Friday. I met with the principal. I'm going to go over there and talk to their business class and their DECA class. And I'm going to tell them about selling paper. It's kind of funny because they made the show The Office, so I can talk about being Dwight Schrute or Michael Scott, and they know who I'm talking about. But there is a future there of a kid that says, if you'll put me with somebody who's 50 and they'll teach me the business, and you say to that kid, I want you in my office every Friday, and I'm going to talk to you about what he does wrong that I don't want you to do. I want, and you're never going to make what he made. But I'm going to give you a career that you're going to be able to go home at 5 o'clock and live your life. And I think there are a whole lot of people who want that. But if you wait until the guy says to you, I'm retiring in March of next year, you waited too long. You missed the window.
The other thing, I'll just follow up on the load discussion and I'll move on, but it's the challenge of the sales force at that point to overcome that load, and you've got to realize it in what you're selling. So, but it's a way to capture what that actual number is for them. So if you adjust your load, say you go from a 4% to a 5%, you've got to get another point on the resale side to pay for that. So that's the challenge from the sales organization, to overcome that expense, other you're just deferring expense within your own organization. So the load just captured as an amount that you're trying to overcome, and then you challenge your sales organization to go get it.
And for what it's worth, you might add to that, we learned one hard lesson. Don't give anybody the ability to override the load. You know, all of us sales leaders override the load because of every great excuse. Once we quit doing that, everybody actually went out and got it.
Well, that was why I've seen this topic come into the mainstream of the management discussions, because that was happening in the traditional pre-COVID days. We would talk all day about this price increase, and then the salespeople would never take it to the market. And so I think right now that's almost inexcusable, and it's really been, I don't know. I've seen pricing strategies and customer receptiveness and the salesperson's expertise to bring those to them. It's never been this good in terms of the art of doing that. And I hear you guys saying it's the better you do that, the better you're going to succeed in the future too.
So a couple things I want to add. You talk about the load, and you talk about how to track that, and you talk about can you make a dynamic matrix to make it happen? There are some tools out there. If you haven't utilized that sales compensation survey, it's something you need to look at. That sales compensation survey that was done this year talks about creative ways and different ways and how they've encompassed all the different types of products that are being sold. So definitely look at that. We are in the middle of the wage and benefit survey right now, and I'm looking at those numbers and telling you that it's not quite as bad as society makes it think, where you have to pay those people so much more to bring them in. The numbers look good, and those things are going to come out in the coming weeks, first, second week of October, and use those tools because they're second to none. 400 or 500 companies contributing data to that wage and benefit survey that you guys need to definitely look at. With that said, Ryan Wagner, you had a comment in the chat as well. So I want to open it up to you just about this conversation of creating that Olympic print salesperson that's selling this value up front and not getting lazy.
I'd really directed the question at Adam mainly, just because he mentioned that he was pastor, and we've dealt with something similar in our congregation at church. That as your congregation ages, if you're not pointing to find a way to grow younger, then eventually the church goes away. It's no different, I think, than what we're dealing with in the print and mail industry, and that if our sales teams are growing older and we're not finding a way to attract younger folks when society's telling them that it's a dying industry? How do we do that? How do we go about making it exciting for them when, you know, it may not be the most lucrative, or you know, Ken, you talked about you guys have the ability for vertical growth, and some of us may not be able to offer that vertical growth. So what do we do to get those young people excited?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Ryan, one of the things that worked for us, so I have 6 associates. We hire you as a trainee. We then turn you into an associate. I have 6 of them reporting to me now, and they are young people. And the thing that I have found that is so important is you got to forget about the way you do business, and you can't let any of your old guard touch them, right? So here's what they want. And I learned this because I have 3 daughters that are aged 36 to 28. And as they talk, they don't want to do what I did, right? I wanted the boat, and I wanted the house, and I wanted all the things I wanted. And so I was willing to show up at 6:30 in the morning in the office and go home at 8 o'clock at night. They think I'm stupid, right? They think that's stupid. They want to have a beer with their friends at 5:01, 5:05, 5:15. So we got to stop treating it like they're working at a slave shop to come in here and just sit next to a press or whatever and work these ungodly hours. It's crazy. So the first thing you got to do is ask yourself, do I have the mentality to be able to do this? Because they're going to operate different than we've ever hired anybody before. And we're going to let them come in when they come in. I don't hold them down. I don't tell them you got to be at the office at 8 o'clock. If they show up at 10 o'clock, I don't care. If they're learning Veritiv, they're learning the industry, and they can go sell, I'm fine. Sell out your paper by noon Friday, go fishing. I don't care. You know, I don't need you to go do other things. And so there's a flexibility that we got to realize that we've got to give them to some degree. But more importantly than that is and I'm going to make a big general thing that my HR department would say I probably shouldn't say, but I grew up in a generation where if my dad said, cut the grass when I get home, the grass better be cut. If the grass wasn't cut, my dad would make sure I knew I'd never do that again. Today, the generation is cut the grass isn't cut. So dad gets home, dad cuts the grass, or mom cuts the grass, right?
Right.
And then I get these young kids and I sit across from them and I say, listen, I'm going to invest in you, but you got to show me something. They are challengeable. They do want to prove something. And I think there's a reward for us if we tell them, I need you to do it different than these other people do it. And I own that with my older sales force to say, they have to do it different than you. But what you have that's really important is you understand product, you understand how to get things done, and you can work across the matrix that is Veritiv and the print community. And I need you to convey that to them, but I don't want them to do it the way you and I did it. They got to do it different, the way Adam talked about. And we invest in them, and they have to know we've invested in them. But we have to do other things that are really different than what we got I just hosted a summer book club called a book called What the CEO Wants You to Know. And I take my time and I read the chapters and I pull out all the stuff. And then I put my 6 associates on the phone with me and I walk them through what's important in every business to be successful. Cash flow and managing your pricing and all those things that we're talking about that are very tough to do today. But here's why I need your help. So then when I have to say to them, I'm not going to pay you as much as the other guys made in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, they understand why that's going to happen. But what I will give you is your time back at 5:01. And I will give you flexibility during the week. And I don't care how many vacations days the company says you have. If you need to knock off, go knock off. Just give me what I need from you when I need it. And that seems to be working for us very well. The harder thing that we're worried about is James is hiring in Houston, by the way. And it's harder to get young people to move today. So I think we might have one who's interested, but it's harder to get them to move. And especially if they like that comfort level of how you brought them in, that could be a bit of a challenge. So it's not all roses. You know, we certainly have our challenges too. But I'm telling you, I don't subscribe to the garbage of this is what the resume ought to look like. Give me a kid out of high school that's ready to prove something and I'll hire him. And they're not hard to find.
Yeah, thanks, Kate.
You're on mute, Rick. You're on mute. And just FYI, we're getting to the top of the hour. So 6 minutes.
Yeah, and thanks, Ken. That's great advice, and I think we all are thinking that way. And I can attest to the progress we're making in our organization by thinking that way. And they keep me with the gray hair away from them, and it helps a lot. So I did want to turn it back to Ryan. You had shared some things in our preparation for this, Ryan, about just the lender relations, the communication is different, obviously, than it was a few years ago. The high levels of inventory and getting the lender to understand that, and the change in dynamics in the business plans and that type of thing. Can you speak to that, I guess, relatively quickly, but let's see if we can talk about what you were sharing there. So.
Yeah, sure. So coming up in the business, my father always told me you need three basic things really to get to be successful besides your clients and your vendors. And your employees. You also need a really good accountant. You need a really good attorney and a really good banker. And in the recent, last past 2 to 3 years, the dynamic of the relationship with the banker has changed dramatically, and especially over the last, I would say, 18 months, especially for us. And I shared with Rick that we're going through a situation right now that lends itself well to this discussion, because the banker that we had been with, our representative at the bank that we had been with for the past probably 6 or 7 years, left and went to a new bank. And we probably spent the first 3 years just getting her to understand our business, because I think that she wasn't well versed in the print and mailing industry, and so we had to stop her from grabbing her trash can to throw up about May and June, when we sent her our P&Ls and not ready to jump ship. And so those ebbs and flows that some of us experience are not that much fun for the bank when they first come on board. And then add to that, now that Ken and Jay spoke about the transition of going from them maintaining most of the inventory to now a lot of the printers are handling the inventory, and getting our bank to understand why, hey, we need to take a different look at our line of credit, or have a different account for a spend account for paper alone. We also have to communicate that to our customers, and can we get any of our customers to say, hey, instead of waiting until the job's completely finished, can we bill you for just the paper once it's in house, so that we're not carrying that for 90 or 120 days or whatever that looks like, depending on what you do. But our relationship with the bank has dramatically changed, and we've had to figure out ways to help them feel more comfortable, help them understand. And through this process of bringing somebody new on board, we've developed some new processes that help us help them. And so rather than just sending them our balance sheet and our P&Ls every month, which we still do, we've brought them in more to some of the inside baseball on what we do with the business, and how we're buying for inventory now, and why we're doing that. And we're showing them our budgeting and forecasting a lot more often, and we're bringing them alongside us to say, hey, here's what we're looking at. Here's why we're purchasing this inventory. We anticipate that we're going to need it in 6 months. And yes, we know we would typically, if you looked at our books 2 years ago, we wouldn't have bought that until 30 days prior. We don't know if it's going to be there 30 days prior. If it's a specialty paper, we don't even know if it's going to be there at all. So we may have to look at an alternative that we need to get now. So doing all that and bringing them alongside makes them feel a little more comfortable and a little more confident. The ebbs and flows are still a little scary, and when you're asking for an increase on a line of credit, or you're asking for a separate account for paper spend, it makes them a bit nervous. But if you're showing them that it's already it's already going to be used, or you have good historical data for them to look at, it presents a better cushion for them.
Well said. I think virtually all of our clients are doing a much more proactive job of communicating with their lenders. It's like like Adam and we were talking about a different engagement with customers. It's a different engagement with lenders, and it's something that has to be proactive. It has to be engaging. It has to be communicating what you're up to, like you said, letting them inside the game plan, rather than trying to meet with them at the end of the year and telling them what happened. I don't know anybody that's doing that anymore. So I just think that was just the word of advice there for all the discussion today was, be proactive and engage in a whole different way. And I think your business can grow, succeed, and will continue to build on that. So anybody else have any quick questions for Ryan or comments about what's happening in that vein? Carl, Ken, you guys seeing the same thing?
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd reiterate too, if you can, especially if you see, you can kind of give them advance warning about what's coming up in the next few months or what they might expect to see from us. And then that comes to fruition, you build that more trust about, what's going on with the business, what's going to happen, and they can rely more on when we say, hey, we expect this to happen, and it happens. And the next time you say we expect this to happen, but it'll come out of it, they're much more willing to trust what's going on.
Yeah, and everybody needs that right now. You need the flexibility. So I don't see any more questions up there, Teresa. I just want to thank everybody, our guests in particular, for participating today, and the conversation has been great. I hope the people on the call have gotten something out of this, and then again, I know anybody wants to reach out with questions later, we're all receptive to that, and so certainly feel free to ping us. Maybe touch on the recording, Teresa or Ben, that people want to get.
Absolutely. So we'll send an email with the link so that you can access the recording. Give us a day or so to get that out to you once it's downloaded and reposted where it needs to be. Excellent content. That's the comments that are coming from those that attended. They say it's just good to hear others talk about the same issues and bring ideas and takeaways to share with their teams. So this was extremely valuable. Great conversation. Thanks to all of you who took the time to be on the call, and definitely share the information with your staff, with your team members when we get that recording out to you. Thanks to all of you who prepared material to present today.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.